Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you here. Welcome. We are very excited to have Joey Leone and his band here today to present the history of the blues while they're touring across the country. We hope you enjoy their performance this afternoon, and if you want to see them again, or if it's so great that you know you need to grab other people, they're going to be performing at the Grand tonight at 7 o'clock as well. We are, of course, very grateful to the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund for making programs like this possible. So if you like programs like this, let us know so we can keep bringing them to you. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. All right, I'm Joey Leone, and I am a musician, an educator, a guitar player, a band leader, a salad dressing, a floor polish. I've done everything in this business you could possibly do. But today I'm going to do something that I'm very passionate about, which is the history of blues in America. And it's not only going to be about the blues, because if there was just a story about the blues and it stopped there, then it wouldn't be the complete influence of the blues. My name is Joey Leone, and I'm the son of Rose Leone. My mother was named Rose Lorraine. That was a professional name. She was a singer back in the big band era, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, as you can tell by my accent. And I was exposed to blues and jazz music at a very early age. My mother, who was a big band singer, succumbed to blindness from retinitis pigmentosa at a young age and couldn't tour anymore. But she always sang in the house and played records in the house. And she would sing to me these beautiful songs like Summertime and The Man I Love and God Bless the Child. And then she told me of an experience that she had auditioned for the great Glenn Miller. And when my mother auditioned for Glenn Miller told my mother, "Young lady, you're a heck of a singer, but you sound more like Ethel Waters than Helen Forrest." Helen Forrest was a pop singer of that era, and Ethel Waters was a black blues singer. So coming from the inner city and very humble background, to say the least, that really impacted me. Like, wow, we could have been really not living in the inner city if Mom had become a great singer with the great Glenn Miller. But those songs, and then I started to listen to music. And then I had this little magical piece of paper. It was about that big. It was called the New York City Public Library card. And with that card, it afforded me the opportunity to travel all over New York City via the subway and bus system to be able to go to different libraries in New York. And there were dozens and dozens of libraries. Many of them had listening rooms where you could listen to records. Many of those records were old 78s. And I gravitated naturally to the blues and jazz records. And for some reason, I just connected to it. And then I started doing that at about the age of 9 years old. And my parents weren't exactly happy about me traveling around New York City at 9 years old, but they understood my great love for music. And pretty soon, librarians around the city started to talk about this weird little kid that spends days at a time reading album jackets as if they're textbooks. And that was my story. And I went around New York City and I listened to the blues. And then they'd let you borrow records and take them home. And these records were records that were made down in the South. Now, the record business in those days, in the turn of the century, in the early 1920s, the record business was really mostly independent labels that were catering to niche audiences. So if you were an Italian American like my family, you could buy records in your native language. If you were Eastern European or you were Chinese American, you could get songs and music in your native language. Well, some industrious record companies thought it would be a good idea to record African Americans down in the South with this new music that they were doing down there called the blues. These artists that they recorded are the foundation of American music, and I'll trace that today for you. Now, to say that the African-American music, the blues that started in the Deep South was the only music that started at that time would not be totally true. There was music that was done by poor white people too, Appalachians, and they were playing their folk music. But the African-American music is so interesting because it really speaks to the universal styles of music that kind of come together. Well, where did these African-Americans, recording in the 1920s with really extremely developed techniques and vocal techniques, as well as instrumental techniques, where did this come from, this music? Well, we all know that because of the nature of the South in those days for African Americans, in the days of slavery, African Americans weren't even allowed to communicate with each other. But what they were allowed to do, interestingly enough, was play music. And they were encouraged by the slave owners to play music. Many times it was classical music. It was music that was not their own. But they had a keen ear and they could pick it up because they did not read music. But the oral history of Africa had come through in the African Americans. These melodies, these intervals of music that were done were combined with, interestingly enough, the chord forms and the music that they heard from travelers from Europe, from England, Ireland, and Scotland, playing their ethnic folk music on portable instruments like acoustic guitars and sometimes pianos. This music, this amalgam of the two different styles of music, the African rhythms, and also working in the fields, what they called the field holler, when the slaves or railroad workers or in the future sharecroppers would work, they would develop this rhythmic kind of music in the field. And you've seen it probably on videos of them working in the South where there's the boss. He would be singing and keeping everyone in rhythm, and they would have these hammers, or they were picking cotton, and they would do what they call a call and response. So the boss man would sing, "You wake up in the morning," and then everybody would go, "Wake up in the morning, and you work till the break of day, work till the break of day." There was this call and response, and you hear that in the blues. So now we have all this energy happening. But to understand how this music happened, a lot of people think of the blues as a sad music. I mean, it's even become part of the American vernacular. When you're having a bad day, you say, "Well, how was work today, honey?" "I got those Monday blues." The blues is almost like a negative thing. But to me, as a young child, and I hear this music, it didn't seem negative to me. Even though they were talking about sad things, maybe floods, pestilence in the South, droughts, your woman leaving you. Like B.B. King said one time in an interview, when you were a black man in the South, if your woman left you, that was the end, because that's all you had. You didn't own no property. So if your woman left you, that was the end of your world. So interestingly enough, we start to hear this blues develop, and the vernacular of the blues, and all these different, a lot of it was double entendre in the blues too. And you'll hear that in some of the songs that I'll present to you today. So these records start to sell. And the artists on these records, people like Charlie Patton, Son House, Reverend Gary Davis, Furry Lewis, were all from the Deep South. You also had Blind Lemon Jefferson. He was from Texas. Then you also had the Chapman brothers from down in the Delta. These were all great musicians, highly skilled. So if you're recording highly skilled musicians in the 20s, chances are they didn't develop overnight. This music had already developed generations upon generations. And this music becomes the foundation of our American music. And like I said, when I bring the band up today, we'll also talk about it. But we're also going to talk about right now is this interesting dichotomy of Southern culture amongst American people and African Americans, especially in the Deep South. The dichotomy of the blues lifestyle. Remember, the blues music was considered the devil's music. It was considered a music that was outside the norm of society and the moral fiber of Southern society, which was based mostly in the church, in the Christian church. So now you have these blues musicians, not very educated, very superstitious, and are also living outside the realm of normal society. And this is where you start to see the blues musician embracing this devilish lifestyle, for lack of a better term, I guess. And of course, you'll hear that in their music. And where did these musicians play? Where did they get famous? Well, they got famous at places called juke joints. A juke joint is kind of like an impromptu little nightclub that would pop up in the middle of somebody's farm or somebody's plantation. And they would get together on the weekends, and people would go there, and blacks were poor, but they had a little bit of disposable income, so they would spend money on the weekends drinking corn liquor and dancing and smoking cigarettes and having a good time carousing and, of course, sinning. Of course, a lot of sinning going on there at the juke joints. And the musicians were the big draw. And like I said, people like Charlie Patton, Son House, Tommy Johnson, they were all great, great musicians. and their records start to sell, and of course, their records are very, very popular. Now, interestingly enough, in my career, I've come across many country musicians who were fascinated by blues. They were like, "Oh man, you play blues? You play with these blues guys?" I was like, "Yeah." And very much blues musicians are like, "Man, you can play that country stuff, can't you?" You know, it's like, there's only 12 notes in music. You know, if you had a piano here, I'd show it to you. But 12 notes, and we all share them. So country musicians, blues musicians, classical musicians, jazz musicians, we all share those same 12 notes. And if you look at a piano, interestingly enough, there are black keys and white keys. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but interestingly enough, when it comes to musicians, color and religion and ethnic backgrounds don't really matter. I mean, you had Eddie Lang, who was a great jazz guitar player. He was a Jewish immigrant, and he was Bing Crosby's personal guitar player, and he spoke broken English. You had Teddy Wilson, who broke the color barrier playing with the great Benny Goodman in a band. So there's a lot of history of blacks and whites playing with each other and playing each other's music. Now, sometimes it was frowned upon to have blacks and whites on the stage at the same time, but music knows no boundaries. So as I said before, you know, we start to talk about the dichotomy of the blues music and of the church music. Well, in one of my little fortunate trips, I worked for many years as my family, I was a musician, but my family was always like, well, you got to have something to back up, you know, you got to have that job to fall back on. That was the word. So I worked as a dialysis technician, a board certified dialysis technician. And I was working downtown Brooklyn at the Long Island College Hospital, and I wanted to make some extra money so I could buy musical instruments and have a studio and buy records. Because buying records to me was the ultimate way of escaping, you know, being in Brooklyn. So I got a second job as a home dialysis technician, and as the good Lord would have it, my home patient was a man named Franklin Johnson from Grenada, Mississippi. And I used to go to his house 3 days a week after my full-time job to give him dialysis treatment. And after about a year, we started to become comfortable with each other. I asked him if I could bring a tape machine to listen to some music while he was on the machine for 4 hours. And he said, sure. And what we listened to? Blues. And he absolutely freaked out the fact that I was this young white kid listening to blues. Well, Franklin and myself, he was my patient for 3.5 years. And about 1.5 years into my treating him, he said to me, someday, Joe, I'm going to take you down to the Delta. And I said, oh yeah, that would be great. But he was a sick man. He was on dialysis. He had been on dialysis for many years. And then one day, I went to show up at his house to give him dialysis, and he waved this piece of paper in my face. And he said, Joe, these are my transfer papers. We're going down to the Delta. And you're going to come as my technician, and we're going to go down and see where the blues started. It was just the most fortunate thing that could ever happen to me. And Franklin pulled that old Chrysler Imperial out of the garage, which I thought would never get down to the Delta. Well, a couple of fan belts and a water pump later, we got there, and I went down and saw the blues, where it started. And it impacted me. Everyone in Franklin's family played, but they couldn't play together because they were not disciplined musicians. So they all played different instruments, and some of them played the jaw harp. Some of them, I remember one guy had a piece of bale wire, and he had it hooked up to a 2x4, and he would play it with a can. Well, the can was actually, and he would play it with a piece of railroad tie. They were all really talented musicians. So anyway, when I was down there, I heard a young musician play this song here, and this will be my first musical part of the show today, and this shows the sinful part of the blues, you know, and this is called the canned heat blues. Now, canned heat, if some of you might know, is sterno. Another name for that is sterno. We see that at like catering affairs, but it basically was grain alcohol, and many poor black people in the South drank this grain alcohol, and many of them succumbed to it and died. Some of them went blind from it, got kidney failure, all kinds of terrible things. But 1927, Tommy Johnson came up with a song called the Canned Heat Blues. And I'm going to play it for you right here, and you'll hear a little bit of this sinful blues music here. Crime can't heat, mama. Crime can't heat, killing me. When I woke up this morning, can't eat was on my mind. Can't eat can't eat mama, killing me. When I woke up this morning, I had can't eat on my mind. When I woke up this morning, can't eat was on my mind. Can't eat can't eat mama, made me blind. All right, guitar. I said, mama, 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 why you treat me bad? I said, now mama, 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 why do you treat me bad? The prettiest girl that I ever had. Can't eat mama, killing me. All right, now, the Can't Heat Blues. All right, thank you. Before I move on to the sanctified music that I plan on playing for you, we're going to talk about this here monstrosity that I'm holding here in my hand. This is a resonator guitar, and the resonator guitar was made by two Polish immigrant brothers, actually three Polish immigrant brothers, who settled in the Midwest of the United States. They're called the Dopera brothers. And they were master metal workers, but they were dying to make guitars. But they didn't have the access to good tone woods, and they had access to a lot of metal. So what they did was they made guitars like this out of brass. This is a guitar made out of brass, and it's nickel plated. And that's why you see the shiny coat on it. And this here is called the biscuit, or that's what we call it, but it's really the resonator. It's kind of looks like one of Richie's cymbals, but it's suspended here on a couple of pivot points. The strings are on it, and it makes a nice loud sound. And it's much louder and projects much better, as you can tell, than a regular acoustic guitar. And when the Dopera brothers made these, they were originally made well known by Hawaiian musicians who played them and like this. They played them on their lap, and the necks were not round like this. They were square necks, and it would lay on your lap, and they'd play it like this. That Hawaiian kind of, otherwise if you're watching the Bugs Bunny show. Anyway, all right, so they toured through the South. Great guitar players like Sal Hopi toured through the South, and the Delta blues musicians see these guitars and go, oh boy, we got to have one of those, because obviously if it's a louder guitar, you're playing in a juke joint, you might make more money. So, but they had to make the necks differently, so they had to make round necks so you could play it like this. So that's the story of the Dobro guitar, the Dopera brothers, Dobro. And now one of the brothers split off the company and started the National Company, National Steel Guitar Company, which they're not really steel guitars, but they call them steel guitars because you play it with a piece of steel, which was always fashioned after an old railroad tie. And this thing here is the slide. This thing is what you... Now, guitar players, you've seen guitar players in modern music, people like Bonnie Raitt play the slide guitar, Lowell George, of course, the great Duane Allman. They used the slides on their fingers too to replicate the sound of that real kind of wailing sound. Interestingly enough, this has been fashioned from a Coricidin bottle, which was old cold medicine they used to have in the 50s and 60s. And a lot of blues musicians who led unhealthy lifestyle, I guess must have used Coricidins, and they picked up this idea to use these bottles. But people have used a spark plug. Dole George, of course, famously used a Craftsman spark plug wrench, a socket rather, and there's been other ones. When I was down in the Delta, I saw a Delta blues musician use a steak bone as a slide. Some of them people, like Vance Lipscomb, they use a penknife. So you could use anything really to stretch it out. But I'm going to talk about a man right now who is one of the most influential guitar players in the pre-war, or what they call the Delta Blues era. His name was Blind Willie Johnson. Blind Willie Johnson is probably one of the most quoted, studied, and influential of all the Delta Blues musicians. Blind Willie Johnson, of course, was blind, like many of the Delta Blues musicians. He sounded like a blues musician. His music sold in blues records, but he never played the blues. He was a sanctified preacher, and he sang inspired, scriptural-based music. Blind Willie Johnson had a very interesting voice, and he was a spectacular, spectacular guitar player. I remember one time when I met Ry Cooder, I had a discussion with him, and he was saying that he studied Blind Willie Johnson for 40 years and can't replicate what these master musicians could do. And remember, they were playing on pretty primitive instruments too at the time. So Blind Willie Johnson, of course, starts recording in the late 20s, and his record's selling very well. Like I said, he's not playing blues, but his records sound like blues. He's been quoted, he's been covered. A lot of musicians have covered his music. They license his music in movies. So if you ever really want to hear some spectacular, spectacular music, check out Blind Willie Johnson. He's all over the internet. You can find him. Blind Willie Johnson, I said, was blind, but in an unfortunate situation, he was not born blind. He was blinded in an accident in his home when his mother and his father, during a domestic quarrel, she took some lye and threw it at him, and it hit him in the face and blinded the young 9-year-old Blind Willie Johnson. The interesting thing about Blind Willie Johnson, remember, these people are documented because of their records, but there's no pictures or videos that exist of these people. There's one picture of Blind Willie Johnson, and he's sitting there and he's not wearing dark glasses like Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder or Jose Feliciano would wear. And I always thought that was kind of interesting because my mother was also blind and she didn't wear dark glasses either. But his quote was that he did not hide his infirmity because if the good Lord had intended him to be blind, he was going to show the world he was going to be blind. Well, that's the kind of person Blind Willie Johnson was. He died in the late 40s, complications of either typhoid or pneumonia after sleeping in his home that had burned down down in Mississippi. But he was a great musician, and thank God his music still exists today. And I'm going to play a little Blind Willie Johnson for you right here. Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. But if I don't read, my soul be lost. Nobody's fault but mine. I got a Bible in my home. I got a Bible in my home. But if I don't read, my soul be lost. Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. My sister taught me how to read. My sister taught me how to read. But if I don't read, my soul be lost. Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault. Nobody's fault. Nobody's fault but mine. But if I don't read, my soul be lost. Nobody's fault but mine. All right. Blind Willie Johnson. Well, thank you very much. Before I bring the boys up, I'm going to play one more quick little tune here. I'm going to retune the guitar. Well, no, they'll keep the tuning. I'll do. There's one more Delta Blues musician that you have to mention if you're doing what I do. And his name was Robert Johnson. No relation to Blind Willie Johnson. Robert Johnson is probably the most important of the Delta Blues musicians. No doubt is. The story of Robert Johnson is that he came one night to Dockery's Farm, which was a famous plantation in the South where blues musicians would gather and play for hundreds of people at Dockery's Farm. And this is during the, obviously during the 20s, during the sharecropping era. That night, Charlie Patton, Son House, and Willie Brown were playing there. And this young skinny kid with these incredibly long, weird fingers shows up in a t-shirt and jeans, like he just came out of the field. and asked if he could play. Well, eyewitnesses said that they let him up, and within a couple of minutes he was booed off the stage. He was terrible. Nobody wanted to hear him, especially after those great master musicians had played. Well, Robert Johnson leaves in total embarrassment, and nobody hears him or sees him for the next 3.5 years. But when Robert Johnson showed up at the end of 3.5 years, he was the greatest musician anybody had ever seen. And even the great old blues musicians of the foregone era said that nobody had done what he could do what he did. His voice, his guitar skills, and he had a bunch of original songs that he had written, which in the blues is kind of unique in a way, because blues music, a lot of times, it's tough to trace these songs back to the original people. But because Robert Johnson started recording in the 30s, we know that those songs had never been recorded before. His songs became the songbook of blues musicians for people like Eric Clapton and Ry Cooder and David Lindley, all these great guitar players, Jeff Beck. Everybody wanted to play Robert Johnson music. The Rolling Stones, obviously. So Robert Johnson had songs like Terraplane Blues, From 4 Until 8, Crossroad Blues. These were all great songs that he had recorded. Everybody covered them. And I'm going to play a quick little version of one of his songs that was covered by many people. Buddy Guy and Junior Wells had a great version of it, and I'm going to play a version of it that goes something like this. Sweet home, Chicago. I said, come on. I said, baby, don't you wanna go? I said, come on. Baby, don't you wanna go? To my sweet fine city, my sweet home, Chicago. One is 2, and 2 is 4. I'll treat you good, baby, but I got to give me some more. I say, come on, and baby, don't you wanna go to my sweet fine city, my sweet home, Chicago. 2 is 4, and 4 is 8. I'll treat you good, baby. Don't you be late, I said, come on. And baby, don't you wanna go? My sweet fine city, my sweet home, Chicago. Sweet Home Chicago by Robert Johnson. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, keep your hands going here for my band. Earl Irving on the bass, Richie Chevolino on the drums. Oh, yeah. Now we're going to get aboard, everybody. Everybody get aboard the blues train, because we're going to take a nice little trip on the blues train. I like that dramatic part where you come out of the back. That was nice, you guys. You guys are real pros. Instead of walking up, tell you something. Trick when you're a band leader, surround yourself with good musicians. And I certainly have done that. So now, what's the blues going to do now? What is the blues going to do? It's becoming so popular, and people love the blues. And the blues, like any great natural ingredient, starts to be developed, and the blues starts to become other music. In 1952, a man down in New Orleans, his name was Smiley Lewis. He predates, of course, the Great Fats Domino. Smiley Lewis had a song that became a national hit record, and it was based on a little blues riff. You're gone away and left me long time ago, and now you're coming back and knocking on my door. I hear you knocking, but you can't come in. I hear you knocking, go back the way you've been. I told you way back in 1952 that I would never mess with you. I hear you knocking, but you can't come in. I hear you knocking, back where you've been. And go back to your used to be, 'cause your love is showing no good for me. I hear you knocking, but you can't come in. I hear you knocking, go back the way you've been. Smiley Lewis, 1952. Thank you. Well, the blues starts to become rhythm and blues, and that one is kind of a foundational song in the rhythm and blues. Rhythm and blues is a combination of a blues vibe, but it's much more, I would say, much more uptown, the blues. It's not really as rural. And rhythm and blues starts to be popular amongst people. And of course, it develops in the late 40s and early 50s, but goes right up until the 60s and 70s in places like Motown, rhythm and blues. But rhythm and blues originally, blues singers originally came from the blues. But the rhythm and blues singers like Sam Cooke, Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave, Al Hibbler, they all came from the church. Their sound was a little sweeter, and the lyrics were much different. They were more love songs. And so we're going to play a little song here that I had the pleasure of playing with this great man himself. One of my pleasures in music was to play with some great musicians that my parents had their records. Lloyd Price was his name. He had records called Personality and Iptide. But he had a song he borrowed from the blues, an old Furry Lewis record from 1927 called Stack-O-Lee Blues. But his was called Staggerly. The night was clear and the moon was yellow and the leaves came tumbling down. I was standing on a corner and I heard my bulldog bark. He was barking at two men who were gambling in the dark. It was Staggerly and Billy, two men who were gambling. Staggerly threw a 7, Billy swore that he threw an 8. We got a little sweet rhythm and blues for you right here. Here we go, boys. Darling, you send me, and I know that you send me. Thought it was infatuation, but you know it's lasted now so long, and I find myself, oh, that I'm wanting to, I wanna marry you and take you home. Sam Cooke, thank you. Well, I guess it couldn't be a History of the Blues show without playing some blues. Well, you know, the blues is kind of, it's an interpretive music. We people that play the blues, we try to interpret it ourselves, you know, and so it's not like classical music where it's exactly the written note. You can hear 20 different versions of Sweet Home Chicago, and by blues musicians, they'll always be different. And with that in mind, I'm going to play you an old song by T-Bone Walker here. This is an old blues, and we're going to make it our own, and we're going to present it to you the best way we know how. In the key of B flat, those of you playing along at home. Wednesday's worse. And Thursday's also sad. Eagle flies on Friday. Sat down when I played. You know, when the eagle flies on Friday, that means you get the Federal Reserve notes. You get paid. Eagle flies on Friday. Sat down when I played. thanks and I pray. I say, Lord have mercy. Have mercy on poor me. I was screaming and crying for mercy. Have mercy on poor me. I'm just trying to find my sweet baby. She didn't go home last night. What's going on here? Somebody please send my baby home back to me. Let me tell you a little story, folks. The Iceman came by last night. He didn't bring any ice. You tell the postman next time he comes to my house, that boy better ring twice. I believe down to my soul, my woman's been running out on me. I believe down to my very soul, I'm getting some outside help that I don't really need. I'll continue. See, I got brown eyes, and my baby's got brown eyes too. 3 of the 4 of my children got blue eyes. What am I gonna do? I believe down to my soul, my woman's been running out on me. I believe down to my very soul that I'll get some outside help that I don't really need. And we started to have a little bit of argument, and my baby said, and I said, and she said, I said, she said, I don't know what to say after that. I tried to talk with her and reason with her. Maybe we can harmonize together. If they cut the lights off in here and they cut the electricity off, we can still have the blues. Oh yeah. say? What? I was screaming and crying for mercy. I was screaming and crying for mercy. I was screaming and crying for mercy. time for me if you can. Cause I'm trying to find my baby. Let me try that one more time. Cause I'm trying to find my baby. Better please come on home. That's the blues, everybody. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm getting loosed up now. I'm telling you, I feel good. I took a couple of Advil before the show, so it's starting to kick in now. So I feel mighty good. Well, we're tracing the history of the blues tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And you can't stop on the blues train without talking about this next man. He was born in Tupelo, Mississippi. Raised up in Memphis, Tennessee. His name was Elvis Aaron Presley. Now, Elvis Presley is a kind of a controversial figure in the history of blues and American music, because there are some people who put Elvis down and say he stole the black man's music and all this other stuff, which is totally untrue. Elvis is an important figure because that day, that fateful day in 1954, when he went into Sun Studios, run by a man named Sam Phillips. Sam Phillips was a very important figure in the history of American music. He ran a label called Sun Records. And in Sun Records, the people like Junior Parker and Howlin' Wolf, who were African-American blues musicians, people like Johnny Cash, people like Jerry Lee Lewis had walked through the doors. Many, many, many dozens of great influential artists walked through that door. But in 1954, they were a studio and they had to make money. So for $10, you could record a demo record. Elvis Presley went in to record a record for his mom. And Sam Phillips just happened to be behind the board that day, and he looked through that glass, like that glass back there. He looked through that glass and he said, a good-looking young white man that sounds like a black man? There might be some money to be made here. And that's exactly what happened. He signed him up to his first recording contract for the Sun label. And Elvis Presley's records on the Sun label, some people argue, and it's a very good argument, that that's some of his best recordings ever. But Elvis, like a lot of great singers, didn't write his own songs. You know, Elvis was not a songwriter. Frank Sinatra didn't write songs. Bing Crosby didn't write his own songs. Perry Como, a lot of great singers didn't write their own songs. They needed songs from songwriters. So when Elvis went in there with his great band, with Scotty Moore on guitar, Bill Black on bass, and DJ Fontana on the drums, they recorded what? They recorded gospel songs, they recorded blues songs, they recorded rhythm and blues songs. They started something called rockabilly. This was such an important time in American music. So please, don't sell Elvis Presley short, even though he made a lot of bad movies in the 50s and 60s. Elvis was a great talent. And we're gonna play a song that Elvis did, his first recording for Sun. Actually, it was his first side. It was an old Arthur Crudup tune. Arthur Crudup was a great black blues musician, and he did his own little take on it. Here's the beginning of rockabilly. This is called That's All Right, Mama. Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right with you. That's all right, Mama. Any way you wanna do it. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, Mama. Any way you do. Well, I'm leaving town today. I'm leaving town for sure. Then you won't be bothering me. Hanging around your door. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, Mama. Any way you do. Scotty Moore. Any way Rockabilly classic. The blues train is stopping at all different stops, and it's making some very important stops. So we've heard rhythm and blues, we've heard rockabilly, and of course, if you listen to Louis Armstrong, which we're not going to play in this show because that's a whole different show, but jazz influenced by the blues too, you know. But now we got one more stop to make here, another stop to make. And where is that stop? Country music. Well, where did country music find the blues? Well, they found it in the same place everybody else did, on them old 78 records. And if you listen to the father of country music, Jimmy Rogers, and if you listen to his recordings made in the late 30s, many of them are almost transcriptions of old blues records. Jimmy Rogers twisted it a little bit, gave it a little bit more twang, plus he also yodeled. And so Jimmy Rogers, as they call him, the father of country music, well, if he's the father of country music, then I guess the grandfather of country music could be the blues. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there was a lot of, country musicians that had the blues. One of my favorites was a guy from Bakersfield, California, of course, Merle Haggard. He had the working man blues. But we're going to play probably the most famous blues influenced song in country music by a man who wore black. And he had a great TV show that I used to watch religiously as a kid. Johnny Cash was an important figure. You know, when he signed that deal with ABC to have that show, he absolutely made them promise that he would not have to have anything but music on the show and that he would pick the acts. And that's why he had the people that he had on there. But Johnny Cash, he wore black, not because it was slenderizing either, which many of us do, but because it was something that he represented. Here's his blues. Hey, the train coming, it's rolling down the bend. I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when, but I'm stuck in Folsom Prison. Time keeps dragging on. Yeah, the train keeps on rolling down the sand. I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, Joey, never mess with guns. I shot him, you know, just to watch him die. I hear a lonesome whistle, hang my head and cry. In that dining car, they probably drank coffee, smoking cigars. Well, I knew I had it coming. I knew I can't be free. If people keep on moving, that's what tortures me. Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues. One more stop on the blues train for today. And they say the blues had a baby and they called it rock and roll. Well, the blues certainly did bring rock and roll to everybody. And, you know, all those great British musicians, interestingly enough, culturally, how a lot of that black music was not allowed to be played on radio stations in our country. Unfortunately, those race records, they were called, insultingly called race records, they weren't allowed to be played on white stations. And the British guys listened to them and brought them back and fed us back the blues. People like Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, the Yardbirds, John Mayall, Alexis Corner, they brought the blues back. The Rolling Stones, of course. Their first couple of records were just blues. So we see this interesting cultural thing about music being repackaged and to a more acceptable format that happened in the 50s and 60s. But, you know, you're such nice folks today, and everybody's been so kind to us here today, and they're putting up, they even got their Betamax cameras, all thing here, and, you know, so, and there's a guy in the back there running an 8-track machine, and so we're gonna play, you know what, hold on a second. I want to play for these folks the greatest rock and roll song of all time. What do you think?
I think it's the greatest rock and roll song of all time. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking, would you like to hear the greatest rock and roll song?
Which please? Yeah.
All right. We're going to play the greatest rock and roll song of all time. Now, there's been some debate over the years, by the way, of what the greatest rock and roll song of all time is, and there's been some really good discussion about it. Let's face it, I'm the only guy here with a microphone and a guitar, so it's pretty much, it's pretty much what it's going to be. But anyway, I take it seriously. It's from a man who came from St. Louis, Missouri, and he had the unique ability to write songs that weren't blues. There was this new rock and roll thing that appealed to young white people sitting in counters drinking sodas and milkshakes. His name was Chuck Berry. Leone on the drums, doing the guitar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Leroy, would it be all right if we did one more song? Absolutely. Would it be all right if we do? You know what? I feel like we want to play one more song, but what do you play after the greatest rock and roll song of all time? It's kind of a thing, but you know, I was thinking about this song, and it was the first song I learned to play on the electric guitar, which is interesting, at least for me. But also, it's a great song because it was one of those British songs that were brought back by a British band called the Animals. And what was it? What was it? It was an old blues song by Leadbelly. Leadbelly was a very important figure in American music. He was a black man and spent a lot of time in prison. And he was a contemporary of Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. He was a man that spoke up. And if it wasn't for a man named Alan Lomax, which you can probably find his book, The Land Where the Blues Began, right here in this library, getting him out of jail, we would never even heard of Lead Belly. But Lead Belly wrote this, it's hard to say if he wrote the song or not. It might have been a traditional song that he did, but the first version I ever heard of it was this. But the version by the Animals was the one that... Nice and easy. On the drums, Earl Irving on the bass. I'm Joey Leone. Thank you so much to all the good folks here who brought us here. We hope you enjoyed this music, learned a little, and brought back some good memories. God bless you, each and every one of you. Good night.
Thank you so much, guys. That was awesome.
Thank you.
You guys like that?